Thank you. My first encounter with Robert Burns was in Mr. Piper's English class during my junior year in high school. He required that everyone read aloud in the class a poem that he would assign, whether it was Shakespeare, Tennyson, whatever. And I got My Love is Like a Red, Red Rose by Robert Burns. Somebody named Robert Burns, never heard of him in my life. After getting acquainted with the poem, I came to the realization that this could become somewhat embarrassing. What teenager would want to recant a love poem in front of all those girls, not to mention some of his good buddies, who were sure to bury him with Eddie Haskell-like remarks after class? It was slated to be the end of my life as I knew it. Wanting to graduate, however, I went ahead and memorized the poem, practicing it out loud with a conjured-up Scottish accent, which I tried to copy from the chief engineer of the Starship Enterprise. For weeks, I walked around the house talking to my parents in this Scottish brogue, and I can tell you they were getting pretty tired of it. The day finally came, and I performed it the best that I could, and Mr. Piper seemed more than satisfied. I received an A for the effort. And my good pals didn't get on me too much after class. In fact, one of my classmates, Mary by name, mentioned what a great job it was, especially with a Scottish accent. Long story short, and not wanting to pass up a serendipitous opportunity, I thanked Mary, asked her out the following week, and both of us attended the senior prom a year later. It would seem that Robert Burns, knowing his history today, was influencing the opposite sex well into the 20th century by way of his poetry. It would have been nice to say that Mary and I went on to get married, but a fella came along with a better poem, and Mary and I went our different ways. May old acquaintances be forgot, no Bunsian pun intended. Burnsian pun, that is. So who was Robert Burns, and why do we celebrate him every year? He was first and foremost, as most of you know, a poet and lyricist, having written over 200 songs and volumes of poetry, and of course today is known as the National Poet of Scotland. He was born on this day in Ayrshire, Scotland, 1759, making him 266 years old today. Was raised on a series of tenant farms, which his father lost all the rights to, so he grew up in poverty, yet his father made every attempt to educate him through local tutors. He was born into a caste system during very turbulent times in terms of social unrest and clashing spiritual, theological, and religious theologies. He was thought to be somewhat of a philanderer. However, of the 14 women with whom he had, and I guess John said 13 children, I had 12, but we can go 12.5. He made what effort he could to take care of them, and at least through his writings expresses a deep and caring love for them. He worked as a tax collector in Ayrshire to make ends meet for a period and received a couple of promotions. He had a penchant for the whiskey, and some consider him an alcoholic. However, he seemed, by most accounts, to be kind of a binge drinker. If there was an occasion to gather, he was generally there, not afraid to take the celebration into the wee hours of the morning. He died at an early age, at 37, of endocarditis linked to rheumatic fever, perhaps in combination with his drinking and lack of available medical technology. Why do we celebrate him? Because I think there's a little of him in all of us. He was the herald of equality as expressed in his poem, A Man's a Man. He was an animal lover, as noted in his Ode to a Mouse. A hopeless romantic with the fairer sex in his My Love is Like a Red, Red Rose and A Fond Kiss. He enjoyed his food, as we heard earlier in Address to the Haggis. He was aware of his mortality as seen in his poem, The Prospect of Death. He loved a great ghost story as evidenced in Tam O'Shanter. He did not trust the media of his day, cynical of what was written or spoken when he penned Death and Dr. Holbrook. He wrote for his whole country, and those of us who want to celebrate our heritage, we can find a whole spectrum of historical issues and sensitivities in his essays and songs. By writing in the Scottish vernacular, we not only visualize Scotland, but we hear it. No other writing that I am familiar with does that. It is not only beauty of expression, but of sound. Some people who have sought inspiration from him include Bob Dylan. Many people thought his inspiration came from Woody Guthrie, but he has stated on many occasions that his inspiration came from Robert Burns, who addressed the issues of his time through his poems and songs. Abraham Lincoln, it is said, he carried a leather-bound book of Burns poems and could recite them for hours. Michael Jackson's Thriller was based on the poem Tam O'Shanter. Some interesting facts and anecdotes. According to the Guinness Book of Records, Auld Lang Syne is the second most sung tune of all time. There are more statues of Robert Burns than any other non-religious figure in the world. The most recited poem at weddings is, "My love is like a red, red rose." This is who Robert Burns was and why we celebrate him every year. So, if you would, please stand and charge your glasses at this time. May I propose a toast by way of a request made by Robert Burns when bidding farewell to his Masonic brothers at St. John's, Tarbolton. And I will read it in the best Scottish brogue I can come up with. Ah, to all farewell, whose heritage claims justly that memory to bear. Heaven bless your honored noble names, your homes in Scotland dear. At last request permit me here, when ye yearly assemble, one round I ask with a tear, to Robert Burns who's far away. Raise your glasses, please. To Robert Burns.
Robert Burns, launch it.